Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. Some important decisions to communicate today. Can I start by first of all saying that when I became Premier 8 weeks ago, I made a promise to the people of Western Australia. A promise that I'd always govern in the interest of all Western Australians. And that I would lead a government that uses common sense and above all, listens to the people. Today, I'm delivering on that commitment. There's been a lot of confusion surrounding the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act that passed our Parliament over 18 months ago. As you know, the laws only came into effect on the July 1, 5 weeks ago now. As we said we would do, we established an implementation group to monitor and listen to any concerns. Put simply, the laws went too far, were too prescriptive, too complicated, and placed unnecessary burdens on everyday Western Australian property owners. As Premier, I understand that the legislation has unintentionally caused stress, confusion, and division in the community. And for that, I'm sorry. The original intent of the legislation changes in 2021 was to prevent another Juukan Gorge tragedy, and my government will deliver on that commitment. But our response to Juukan Gorge was wrong. We got the balance wrong, and what we did hasn't worked. It is crucial that we manage Aboriginal cultural heritage in a common sense manner so that we can move forward together as a community, so that we can restore confidence in our cultural heritage systems, strike the right balance, and provide the community with a simple and effective system. One that ensures all landowners are equal and all have one simple obligation: to protect the heritage of our state. Since I became Premier, we formed an implementation group to monitor, report, and address any issues that arise and help provide options for improvements. As I said, this is a government that listens, a government that listens to everyone in the community. That is why, based on community feedback and following serious consideration, I and the government have made the decision to overturn the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act 2021. We will restore the original Act from 1972 with some simple and effective amendments. The decision has not been taken lightly. It has been made based upon the best legal advice and after detailed discussion and an analysis of the many options, including making changes to the 2021 Act. But by reverting to the original 50-year-old legislation, we can reset, end all the confusion, and importantly, strike the right balance. We can ensure Aboriginal cultural heritage is valued and protected. And with simple amendments, we can deliver a common sense approach and prevent another incident like Juukan Gorge. Importantly, all WA property owners can continue to operate and manage their property just like they have for the past 50 years, without any fear of unknowingly disrupting cultural heritage sites. The exemptions which were introduced as part of the unworkable 2021 laws will no longer be required, as every landowner is equal. And the changes announced today will end the onerous burden that was placed on landowners. A key point I want to make is that there will be no requirement on everyday property owners to conduct their own heritage survey. The state government will start a long-term plan over the next decade to undertake heritage surveys of unsurveyed areas in high priority sections of the state and with the consent of landowners. The surveys will then be centrally held and published by government for the benefit of the state. Areas where development is imminent will be prioritised, and the cost recovery model introduced for proponents who need to submit a management plan to the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Council will also be replaced. In its place will be a fairer, simpler model which will be established with industry in the coming weeks. The concept of local Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Services, or LARCs, will not continue. Over the coming months, we will transition away from the LARCs model and instead provide support to existing relevant native title groups to improve their capacity to work with government and industry. The important work of the implementation group that was set up in June will continue to ensure that we can transition back to the modified 1972 laws in a seamless way. Even though I've only been in the job of Premier for 8 weeks, I've been involved in public life for long enough to know how important it is to make a decision. And any decision involves criticism. That's the nature of the job. Today's announcement is about listening to the people of Western Australia. It's about carefully considering the circumstances in front of us. The Juukan Gorge tragedy was a global embarrassment for Australia. Something needed to be done. No one can argue with that. But our legislative response was wrong. I want to thank everyone across the community for their feedback and particularly acknowledge some of the key groups impacted for their advice and the discussions that we have had in recent days. This feedback has been important, and importantly, my government has listened. And what is required now is action and leadership. As Premier, I will always lead a government that listens and governs in the interests of all Western Australians. We are here to help and to deliver responsible government. We have a positive way forward. A way forward that preserves and values the oldest known living culture in the world and ensures Western Australians can continue to live their lives and reach their full potential. I now hand you over to Minister Booty before taking some questions.
Thank you, Premier, and good morning, everyone. Since the introduction of the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act 2021 on July the 1st, the Cook Government has received significant representations from property owners, industry bodies and business regarding the complexity of the legislation. In developing the 2021 legislation, we embarked on an extensive 5-year consultation and co-design process through which we tried to meet everyone's expectations. Our intention was to ensure another Juukan Gorge did not take place. We wanted to provide legislation equipped with greater certainty and protection for Aboriginal cultural heritage, but unfortunately it did not deliver the clarity and security that we desired. The 2021 legislation has been found to be complex and over-prescriptive. This has caused confusion and concern in the community. This was never our intention, and I am sorry this has happened. We have listened to the concerns raised and taken the time to assess the legislation and find a way forward that is fair, reasonable and responsible. As the Premier has indicated, our government has decided the best course of action is to repeal the 2021 Act and reinstate the 1972 Act with targeted, simple amendments aimed at ensuring that there is no further destruction of cultural heritage like we saw with the devastating loss of the 46,000-year-old Juukan Gorge rock shelter. In repealing the current Act, we will remove the tiered approval system, which we have been told is confusing, and will revert to the approval system under the 1972 Act and the well-known and well-understood Section 18 process. The Section 18 process will be strengthened with changes mainly impacting miners and government whose work most impact cultural heritage. These amendments to the Section 18 process will provide traditional owners with the same rights of appeal as those afforded to land proponents. There are 3 key enhancements. These include, first, it will extend the right of review of a Section 18 decision to the native title party whose cultural heritage is impacted by the decision. Secondly, it retains and builds upon the 2021 amendments that require a landowner to notify the government if the owner becomes aware of any new information about any Aboriginal site in relation to the land that is the subject of the Section 18 consent. And thirdly, it will expressly make it clear that gag orders which constrain traditional owners will be unlawful. And as the Premier indicated, we will also remove the role of the local Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Services, or LARCs. The bill will also provide for greater representation of Aboriginal people in the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Committee, the key body that provides advice and recommendations to the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs. Also, the state government will now take on responsibility and control over conducting heritage surveys on unsurveyed areas in high priority areas of the state with the consent of landowners. This will benefit all Western Australians. The amendments we have made today, that we have announced today, are in response to listening to the concerns of the community, including our caucus members, particularly our regional members, who continue to strongly represent their local communities. I look forward to working hard to ensure we have an Aboriginal cultural heritage regime that works for all Western Australians. Thank you.
Righto, any questions?
Premier, you said that there is a government that's listening. Was the government not listening earlier when this came through, and was it not listening when this law was passed through Parliament?
Well, these laws passed in part through Parliament in 2021. There was forthright debate during that time, and those laws were passed with the overwhelming support of all members of Parliament, with the exception of a couple of independents and I think the Green in the upper house. When we were implementing these laws, that's the reason why I put in place the implementation group, which was about making sure that we had the opportunity to listen to the community. That implementation group continues to meet and will continue to meet into the future, but it's become very clear from both that work and the public debate that we cannot get consensus around the Aboriginal cultural heritage laws, and that's why it's important we put these decisions in place today.
Premier, it took 5 years to get the legislation to this point, and you're now talking about just some simple amendments to the 1972 Act. Why was that path not pursued in the first place?
Look, these laws have been worked on for, as you say, for over 5 years, subject to significant community consultation, particularly with our mining industry and the Aboriginal community groups. They continued to do that work and brought together what they thought were the best possible ideas. There are many people involved in the development of these laws, but it is clear now, once it's in the bright light of day, that these laws will not be able to move forward in a way which maintains consensus in the community. So I think it's the best thing to do is to take a significant and tough decision and simply revert back to the old, to the previous laws, but make sure that they're modified with simple and effective amendments to ensure that we don't have a Duke and Gorge situation.
In your defence of these laws, as Premier, you said that the opposition you likened the opposition to a dog returning to its vomit. The implication being that they were racist for criticising or wanting to analyse, scrutinise these laws. Do you regret those comments?
Well, they're your implications, not mine. I was reminding the Parliament that Labor has always been the party in government that stands up for the most disadvantaged in our community, and I'm very proud of that track record, and that's one that will continue.
Are you proud of those comments, though?
I'm proud that Labor has always stood up for the most disadvantaged in our community, and that is a legacy and part of our values, and we'll continue to do so.
Was the rhetoric too far? Did the rhetoric go too far, Premier?
Well, look, what I'm trying to do is make sure that we have a government that listens, and that's what I've done today. We've listened to the concerns of the community. We've made tough decisions. These decisions aren't easy, but they're in the interests of governing for all Western Australians, and that's why we've put them in place today.
But were you listening 4 weeks ago when in Parliament you did make those comments, which I believe were raised by the opposition who had been speaking to farming groups? Were you listening then?
I always listen, and that's why we've made these decisions today. And we'll continue to listen to the community, work with the community to make sure that we've got strong laws in place.
You
Prime
downplayed
Minister,
it. You
has
downplayed
the Prime
it.
Minister or any federal ministers express any concerns to you about the damage this has caused to the Voice referendum?
I want to make this very clear. I've not had any communication with the Prime Minister's office or any federal members in relation to these laws. The only contact I've had with the federal government in relation to these laws is when I contacted the Prime Minister yesterday to announce that we'd be likely to move in this direction.
Are you concerned personally about the impact these heritage laws have had on the Voice vote, not just in WA, but nationally?
Well, the Voice is about three simple concepts: acknowledgement, recognition and consultation. I think any fair-minded Australian believes that they are important things to embody in our constitution. I'll continue to campaign for those.
Is the process now being damaging for the Yes campaign, and how could that be amended now through your?
Well, look, I can't analyse or provide you with commentary in relation to the Voice campaign. What I can say is that in relation to our Aboriginal Cultural Heritage laws, put in place with a lot of hard work by the community, by government and by industry, have got to the point where they simply cannot work. And I'm sorry about that. Governments have to make tough decisions at times. And I'm sorry that we've now find ourselves in this situation. That's why we are putting in simple and effective amendments to the 1972 Act to make sure we will never see another Duke and Gorge scenario, but also to make sure that we can move forward with consensus in the community.
What do you say to traditional owners of the Duke and Gorge who say they feel betrayed by this decision?
Well, there's a lot of emotions surrounding that particular issue, but as the Minister explained, we are making decisive changes to the 72 Act which would prevent the Duke and Gorge situation. So let me make them clear. The Duke and Gorge events would have been prevented if there was an onus on the proponent to bring new information that would come to light to the Minister's attention, and that will be required under our amendments. We will also explicitly forbid rules being put in place that will forbid a native title group or traditional owner group from raising concerns in relation to heritage. And we'll make sure that they have a right of appeal in the event that a decision is made. And they are important amendments that we've put in place.
How long will those amendments take? Will they be declared urgent, and is there a risk of another Duke and Gorge in the meantime?
No, the laws in place are what they are, and we'll continue to make sure that we implement those laws in the appropriate way. As I said, in collaboration, in an educative way, and in partnership with the community, and that's been our approach all along. We'll put these laws into Parliament as soon as possible, and they'll make their way through the Parliament in the appropriate timeliness.
Given the last legislation was declared urgent, isn't this urgent?
And did you consult with any groups on these new amendments?
Just first, if I may, I can just deal with that question. Yeah, no, it won't be declared. It won't be declared urgent.
Does that suggest the previous one should not have been declared urgent?
No, I'll go to Hamish's question now, which is about traditional owner groups. Look, as you know, I've got. Let me answer it this way. I know that Minister Booty's office has done extensive consultation with traditional owner groups, and Minister Booty has undertaken them himself. I've had significant contact with industry groups as well, and obviously I've had feedback from a lot of members of the Aboriginal community in relation to this. I just want to reflect on a conversation I had this morning with a leader in the Midwest region. He says, these laws were very difficult. We found them hard to understand. I'm so pleased you've made the decision that you have, because they go back to the previous regime, and we are used to working with that regime to protect our Aboriginal heritage. I think that's fairly instructive, because what it means is that people can now go back to a system that they understood clearly, where both proponents and native title groups understood what their obligations were and their rights were, and can now move forward together.
Will you ever consider another rewrite while you're in government? Or is this it?
Look, we've got no reason to revisit these laws again. These are simple and effective amendments that will prevent a Duke and Gorge situation from occurring. So we've put them in place. We will allow the Parliament to scrutinise them properly over the coming weeks, and continue to work with the industry and the community around the regulations and policies that are involved.
You said all landowners will be treated equally moving forward.
Yep.
What do you mean by that? Does that extend to traditional owners?
Well, what I mean is that currently, under the current laws, the 2021 laws, we were seeking to carve out particular forms of tenure, particular forms of activity. So that they will all fall by the wayside in relation to the new laws. So that was an activity-based approach in relation to protecting Aboriginal cultural heritage. We are now moving to a knowledge-based approach under the original laws. And so that means everyone will have an obligation to protect Aboriginal cultural heritage and have an obligation to not knowingly disturb Aboriginal cultural heritage. But we won't have a situation where someone has to justify or do a heritage survey for a particular act on their land.
You mentioned the decade-long project moving forward, the government surveying places that haven't yet been surveyed with consent of landowners. What happens if a farmer declines to consent?
Okay, so look, I want to put a little bit more colour and movement around this particular program. It's always bemused me as why, over the decades that we've had these laws in place, that the state government hasn't got more involved in proactively discovering our Aboriginal cultural heritage sites. And that's why we will be utilising some of the resources already committed to this particular Act to ensure that we undertake a program of heritage survey planning across Western Australia, particularly in the southern regions. Now, there's no reason other than if an inspector believes that there's going to be a particular disturbance of a particular site to enter any land. So if a farmer doesn't want, for instance, an Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Survey to be undertaken on their land, that won't happen. There is no need for it to undertake an Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Survey if a particular member of the community wants to do work on their land. The only obligation is if they knowingly disturb an Aboriginal cultural heritage site. That's the only incident, and that's the laws that have been in place for the last 50 years.
Can I just confirm it's the money that was assigned to the larks?
That's correct, yep.
Redirected to the heritage?
Yeah, so we'll be using that with those resources to make sure that we support Aboriginal groups to continue to engage with government and industry in relation to their rights under the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act. We'll also be using those resources to make sure that the government undertakes a proactive program of Aboriginal cultural heritage surveys.
Do you think with hindsight the criticism that the Labor government rushed these laws through Parliament was fair at the time?
Well, look, that was back in 2021, so I won't revisit the history of that, but I just want to be able to say to the people of Western Australia, when I became Premier, I said I would listen, and that's what I've done. I've listened, I've heard, I've acted, and today we're putting those actions into place.
So does that signal that in future you'll be more hesitant to declare legislation urgent and instead seek a more thorough process in Parliament?
Well, look, I've always said that I want these laws to be in place in a collaborative and partnership approach, taking an instructive approach to the implementation of the laws. That's my style of leadership. That's the leadership I want to bring to this state. Sorry.
You're trying to make a distinction that you are going to listen and use common sense. Did your predecessors not use common sense and listen?
I can only comment on my own style of leadership, and that's the approach I'm taking.
Why should the public take confidence in other legislation passed in recent years?
This is particularly complex legislation. Governments have been trying to strike a new set of laws around Aboriginal cultural heritage for decades. And I know that because I've been involved in discussions with previous governments around these issues when I worked for Aboriginal land councils back in the early 2000s. They are difficult laws to strike that balance. We haven't succeeded in this particular case, and I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry on behalf of the government, and I want to acknowledge and thank everyone that's had input and worked with these laws to try to make them happen. But a tough decision has to be made, and I've made that decision, and today we are moving forward with simple and effective changes to the 72 Act to prevent the Duke and Gorge scenario.
You say sorry, but there's 6 years of work in this, a lot of taxpayer resources expended. Should someone lose their job, should a bureaucrat lose their job, does the minister still have your confidence?
Many people have had a role in the striking of this legislation and the implementation of this legislation. As I said, over 5 years, the laws were actually passed in 2021. So I'm not engaging in a blame game. What I'm doing is apologising to the people of Western Australia on behalf of the state government, making a decisive decision and taking action to ensure that we can move forward with consensus rather than the confusion and the division which has been created around these laws.
The
I mean, you
opposition
say
has
those
called
laws
for-
were
the
passed.
opposition-
Let me go back
The
just a
opposition has called for Minister Booty to be sacked, pointing out he was the minister responsible for the implementation of these laws. Will that happen?
No, and we won't be listening to the opposition in these sort of shrill sort of political calls. We'll continue to work with the community to make sure that we implement laws which are effective and on a consensus approach.
You say these laws were passed in 2021, and now that this change shows that you're listening, you were Deputy Premier in 2021. Were you not listening then?
Oh, look, we were, and I just remind you that these laws went through the Parliament with almost the unanimous support of all MPs. But with the benefit of hindsight and with the benefit of the hours and the months and the years of work being put into the implementation of these laws, we now realise that they cannot be implemented effectively. We cannot implement them in a way which is constructive, which gets rid of confusion and gets rid of division. So the consensus has been broken. I want to re-establish that consensus by going back to a regime that everyone is familiar with, but with simple and effective amendments to make sure that we don't have a Duke and Gorge scenario.
Warren Mundine is going to visit in Perth in August, and I asked him about this issue on Sunday. He said that this is a perfect storm, and your government and the federal government has scores on you. Now,
So who made that observation, sorry?
No, Warren Mundine.
Oh, Warren Mundine,
Yeah.
right.
So is it unfortunate that despite those issues have been separate, you try to keep them separate? People will say, okay, this is what happens on the heritage laws now, this is what's going to happen to the boys. It's unfortunate that both have been now linked by people in people's minds now already, and you can't unroll them.
Look, I have no comment in relation to comments from Warren Mundine or anyone in the no case. I'll be supporting the yes case in the voice. It's simple and I think common sense that we should acknowledge, recognise and consult Aboriginal people on issues that concern them.
Yeah, will you be
Farmers and
addressing
pastoralists
the-
are rallying outside Parliament House today in anger over these laws. Do you regret not paying more attention to the 30,000 signature petition, mainly from those farmers?
We've had a number of meetings with the farming community and with their representatives. Minister Booty has had extensive consultation. I've met with them too, and we'll continue to work with them on implementing common sense laws which protect our Aboriginal cultural heritage and laws which prevent another Duke and Gorge.
Will you address them today?
Sorry, Jess?
Will you address them today? Have you been invited to?
I have been invited to address them. I have other commitments, but we will make a government representative available. Yes. Yes, sorry,
Can I just
Michael.
get you to take us back to those comments, because it's an amazing quote, the dogs returning to their vomit. So just to be clear, you weren't implying that the opposition was racist. Have they misinterpreted that?
Well, clearly they have. I'm reminding them that it is only a WA Labor government which will stand up for the people of Western Australia, particularly the most disadvantaged in our community. I'm very proud of that record. It's part of our values and it's part of what we do in government.
Premier, it was a little over 6 weeks ago you refused the
Do you regret
opposition.
framing it that way though, Premier? Do you regret using that language? Would you use it again?
Look, I'll always remind people that WA Labor stands up for the most disadvantaged in our community. We govern for all, but we will make sure that we stand up for those who are doing it tough. That's the reason why we support people when there's a cost of living crisis. That's why we continue to support people when there's a rental challenges for our rental market, and that's what we do in
It
government.
was a very
I've got a
divisive
question
quote
for the
though, wasn't
Premier.
it?
Sorry, yes, over here, Jet, Paige.
Thanks. Is it possible, am I understanding this correctly, that someone could decline to have their land surveyed and then go ahead and wreck a heritage site because they can honestly say they did not know?
Only if they did not know. So if they knowingly disturb an Aboriginal site of Aboriginal heritage, well then they'll be prosecuted under the laws.
What if a traditional owner group has the belief that there might be a heritage site on that land, and they request the government to go and survey it?
Well, look, what we are seeking to do is to put in place laws which guide people to manage Aboriginal cultural heritage. I have not met a single person in the community that says that they want to undertake development at the cost of Aboriginal cultural heritage. What they want is a framework whereby they can work and find agreement around how they go about discovering that Aboriginal cultural heritage and then protect it. No one has come to me to say, look, we're just trying to slip through. We're just trying to get something through. Everyone values our Aboriginal cultural heritage, and these laws that we've put in place with simple and effective amendments to the 1972 Act means that we can ensure that we help people reach agreement with Aboriginal people. So we're getting away from a compliance model to an agreement model, making sure that people are encouraged and assisted to work with Aboriginal community in the communities in which they live to protect Aboriginal cultural heritage.
Can you explain what's unfolded over the last few days? Why has it taken you until Tuesday to address a decision that was clearly already made on Friday?
Well, the decision wasn't already made. The decision-making process has been operating. I took a proposal to Cabinet and a proposal to the WA caucus. I've been talking with members of the community about some of the proposals, not the details, but that's an example of a government that listens, responds and makes decisive action so that we can govern for all Western Australians.